Introduce yourself a little.
My name is Greg Hobrick. I'm a water and wastewater operator with the city of Rock Valley, Iowa.
Where were you born?
I was born in Carroll, Iowa.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up on a farm in between Templeton, Iowa and Carroll, Iowa.
What was your town like?
Well, we didn't spend a lot of time in Templeton because Roselle was a smaller little town where our church was. And it was smaller than Templeton. It was an intersection with four corners, basically. The church was one corner, the second corner was a meeting hall, the third corner was a grocery store, and the fourth corner was a tavern.
What activities did you participate in when you were growing up?
Well, I had to work a lot on the farm. There was lots of things to do. And I also went to grade school in Roselle. But other than that, there really wasn't a whole lot of activities. I did spend a lot of time reading.
What was your family like, such as your parents, your extended family, or your siblings?
Well, everybody was pretty much dedicated to just working on the farm. So you would just work and you'd come in and eat and maybe watch some TV and get ready for bed and then start over the next day. And of course, when I was going to school, I had to study as well.
What education did you receive?
I went to 12 years of regular school, and then I went to 4 years of college. I have a Bachelor of Science degree.
Talk about your marriage. How did you meet?
I met my wife through one ad in the Farm Journal magazine. It's a long story, but the gist of it is that the women had one ads in, and so did the men. And my wife actually wrote me a letter, and then one thing led to another, and we ended up getting married.
Did your wife and you have compatibility when it came to religion?
Actually, I was born and raised Catholic, and my wife was born and raised Lutheran, so that was somewhat of a incompatibility. And at the time, we were farming with my parents, and she was going to probably change to the Catholic Church, but then circumstances changed, and I ended up moving to Northwest Iowa and farming with my wife's dad, and so then I switched to the Lutheran Church.
Your life changed moving from where you grew up to Northwest Iowa?
Well, it was actually kind of a culture shock because in my area, people work 7 days a week, and on the farm, you never had a day off. And the implement dealers were open on Sunday, and in the fall, the grain elevators were open on Sunday, and that's just how it was. And also, there was quite a bit of drinking going on in the area because taverns and bars were pretty common, and that was just part of the lifestyle. Now, moving up to Northwest Iowa, we have the Reform congregation is predominant up here, and this is just a general way of saying it, but for the most part, they are very strict on not doing anything on Sunday except going to church, and some, but not all, are against alcohol use. So I guess those were things that were kind of hard for me to get used to, although the fact that we didn't work on Sunday was kind of nice because then a guy could actually use Sunday as a day of rest from farm work. And the only farm work I had to do was just the regular chores that we would have to do for the livestock. So I really thought it was, there again, it was like the question I answered earlier about putting yourself in a situation and just having to get used to it. And so the fact that I was able to get in this different culture, even though it was the same race, so to speak, but it was a very different culture, religion-wise, and I don't know what I want to say, but the gist of it is that it was very different. And I did get used to it over time, and now I probably would have a hard time going back to an environment where I would have to work 7 days a week.
When do you think you were first exposed to diversity?
When I went to college.
How has society changed since you were a child?
Well, I think there's not as much blatant racism as there was when I was a child. I think there's still racism, but it's just not as blatant.
Did you ever think you would see an African American president?
I actually thought that we would see an African American president. I thought it probably would be sooner than what it was actually.
Does race and racism continue to play a role in American society?
It does, and it's all facets. I mean, you will have black people having racist attitudes toward white people, and vice versa, and the other minorities as well.
In what ways has America moved forward since the civil rights movement?
Well, I think there's much more. There's laws in place to prevent racism, which have helped quite a bit, and it's forced people to get together and live together, and they realize that they're really just people just like them. And before that, without the laws, people would just sit in one corner and glare at the other people in the other corner. And now, with the laws forcing them to be together, for the most part, I think people have found out that they're really not such bad people after all.
Have you ever had friends from a different race?
One of my college roommates was from Iran back in the 70s, before the Shah of Iran was overthrown. He had sent several of college-age kids to America to be educated, and some of them came to the college that I attended. And so circumstances put us together. And I thought it was a very enlightening experience. He seemed to be a very likable fellow after I taught him how to shower, because his hygiene was not very good, because they weren't used to being clean.
How did he differ from your other friends?
Well, the fact that 3 times a day he had to get his prayer rug out and pray to Allah, that was very different than what I was used to. But I accepted that because that's just the way he was, and being he was a nice enough fella, it was kind of like what I talked about earlier about being forced to be together. You know, you overlook some of the things that are different than you because you like the person.
What do you know about American Indians?
Well, unfortunately, the only association we had with American Indians was when I went to college, and it was a negative way, because you would go and see these people in a bar setting, and they were usually, those folks were really pretty mean and wanted to pick fights, and weren't very nice people.
What are some things people can do to become more aware of the diversity of race and culture around them?
Well, I think they should just, if happenstance puts you in a position to be with a person of a culture or a race different than yours, you should try to embrace that and try to know the person as a person.
Okay, thank you.